right. So as everyone's jumping in, we're just going to give it a couple minutes for a couple more people to jump on, and then we'll get started. Look forward to chatting with everyone today. If there's any questions that you have as we're kind of talking today, please do put them into the chat, because we're actively monitoring all of the conversations, and we'll weave some of your questions into the presentation that we're going through, which really there's not much of a presentation. We're just going to be talking, which is going to be a lot of fun today. Cassandra, do we have most of the people in?
Yeah, we have about 18 customers on. They're still trickling in. I think I would give it one more minute and then you can get started.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Got quite a few people signed up today for our fireside chat, which is great, because I know we have a large panel of experts to chat through, and I'm looking forward to really kind of picking the brains of Citrix, NVIDIA, and Nutanix on where they're seeing VDI go today, as well as where it's come from, and how we're solving a lot of our customers' challenges from a bunch of different initiatives as we look to public cloud, on-prem, and solving some of those high performance applications, as well as some of those global remote work from home solutions. So with that, I'm gonna get started here, because we have a lot to kind of talk about, and people will kind of catch up. So first things first here, introduce myself. My name is Ryan Beauchamp. I'm going to be our moderator and leading some of our conversations, asking some of the questions to our experts. I'm one of our principal solution architects based out of Vancouver, BC, but I cover our VDI practice across Canada. And I wanted to get together some of my top vendors that I look to when I'm going to VDI. So got Citrix, NVIDIA, and Nutanix all jumping on a call with their EUC specialists from Canada and North America standpoint. So we'll go through. So for everyone that doesn't know CDW, which I'm glad most people do, but we are a solutions-driven company. We're ranked second in IT service industry. We have $20 billion worth of sales in 2021, and I believe we're going to be capping that. But really, this shows like we have a lot of expertise in a lot of different areas. And one of the things I'm excited to talk about is always VDI, HCI, as well as some of the public cloud and hybrid cloud solutions. And today I want to really bring forward what CDW is seeing in the marketplace, as well as getting some really kind of personalized touch of what our vendors are seeing out there for how organizations are tackling some of the challenges. So today on the expert panel, I've done my introduction. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin Bacon to introduce himself.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm Kevin Bacon with Nutanix. I'm Senior Solutions Architect for EUC, and I'm happy to be here on the panel. Todd?
My name is Todd Smith. I'm the pre-sales engineering leader for Citrix Canada. I've been with Citrix for 17 years through a variety of different roles, and I look forward to chatting with everyone. I'm based out of the Boston, Massachusetts area.
And my name is Ray Latigo, Senior Solutions Specialist or Architect, Solutions Architect for NVIDIA. Long time history with CDW. Prior to this, I was with the HPE as a Solutions Architect and part of the CDW HPE pre-sales prior to that. So long time with you guys, and happy to be here to help you out.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys. And for everyone, that is the end of the presentation. No more slides. We're going to jump right into actual conversation now. So I think for me, the last 3 years have been nothing but eye-opening and exciting with unfortunately COVID happening, but from a VDI sense, as I've had more conversations in the last 3 years about work from home solutions and how organizations are really kind of tackling this work from home. So the first question I really have to the panelists here, what are the top 2 to 3 business problems that organizations are looking to VDI to address? You know what, Todd, I'm going to start with you from the Citrix angle. Like, what are your 2-3 top business problems?
Yeah, so great question. And there's probably more than 2 or 3, but to answer to this question. But I would say the first one is really the move towards more of this hybrid work model, where people are going to spend a portion of their weeks in the office, like I am today, and then a portion of their week is also going to be spent working from a home office or some other location. The problem that we need to solve is the ability to have their work follow them regardless of where they are. And this is something that Citrix has had for a message for many, many years, but it really has become more and more critical, where people don't know always where they're going to end up working for the day. It could be at home, it could be at the office. A variety of different reasons are impacting that. That's the first problem. The second problem is around security. As we've sent people to go work from different locations, they may be sharing an office at home with a spouse or a partner who works for a competitor, who has a variety of other things that are bombarding their home network, that is introducing new security risks, right? And really the third one is really around cost efficiency and being able to do this, come up with a solution without having to go break the bank, right? And the traditional way of doing it was give everyone a VDI desktop, which tends to be very expensive. And we were giving people a full VDI desktop because they just needed access to 1 or 2 applications. So we've rethought the strategy and brought back some of those core elements that Citrix has been known for, about delivering the application and delivering what services are needed to that user at what point in time. And then also to be able to do it securely regardless of where they are. So all kind of ties back together.
It's like you touched like right away on some of the applications, and I'm going to throw this right over to Ray, because a lot of the applications, like task workers, are office workers. We're able to do those no problem. But when we really start to get into some of those high-powered applications, some that sometimes need GPU resources, instantly I start looking at NVIDIA. So, Ray, what are you kind of seeing on your side?
That very thing exactly, right? It does no good if we can enable people to work remotely, but they're not getting a good experience on their side, right? So we have these users that are maybe they're CAD users or computer-aided engineering users that now are working remotely, right? And how can I give them that same experience, and have them be efficient at their job, right? Well, that's where the GPU comes in, right? But more than that, like now, how do I take that GPU, right, and splice that up in time segments and be able to give the appropriate amounts to people, right? So just to piggyback on what was said earlier, it's like, yeah, remote working is fantastic, but let's get that experience level to where it has to be with the right feature set needed.
Great. And like, is there any other business challenge or business problem that you're kind of tackling with NVIDIA within like the VDI space, in addition to being able to leverage those higher graphics processing? Like with NVIDIA Grid, we're able to, like you said, cut everything all up and provision it out. So instead of having multiple GPUs on your desktops, we can get a lot of consolidation across the workforce now.
Oh, most definitely, right? And so one of the things, and myself included, I'll run a GPU profiler on what I'm doing, and here I'm thinking, oh, I have a ton of things open and I have a lot going on. I probably need at least 4 gig of frame buffer space. The truth was I needed 1, right? Or I'm just sub 1. So, one of the problems that we solve here is how can I utilize these resources, efficiently and utilize as much of the GPU as I can, right? So getting the most out of their dollar. And the other thing is too, like how dense can I get these nodes as well, right? Well, if experience is part of that, the better experience I can give some folks, maybe the more dense I can get on a node without them feeling that pinch, right, of having to share a GPU.
Awesome. And Kevin, I'm going to throw the same question to you because I've seen you smile a couple times through the last little bit. And when we're talking about the applications, performance with running Nutanix with on-prem, but then also the security side, for as I know, security is top of mind when it comes to Nutanix, as all your boxes are like very secure right out of distribution at that point.
Yeah, Ryan, I think Todd and Ray covered it really well from that end user perspective, the use cases that enterprises are trying to deliver to their users that are now everywhere. And I was laughing about when Ray was thinking, I was just thinking, really there used to be this idea of like a knowledge worker, the person that just kind of worked on spreadsheets all day and maybe PowerPoint. That's basically gone away. I mean, I don't think there's like that whole category that we've had for like the last 20 years just to me doesn't even exist anymore. Basically, all of those people are power workers because they're going to be doing, video sharing, they're going to be doing Zoom or Teams or all of the above. And so I almost group everybody, unless they're like doing like a specific application on a kiosk or maybe there's certain like, a nurse putting in some basic tasks. Otherwise, they're pretty much all power users in my book. So I just kind of treat them all that way. But I think the use cases that I'm seeing more on the infrastructure side are really looking at more on the on-prem side. How do I make this a lot simpler? So a lot of times I'm working with the Citrix administrators. They know the Citrix piece well. They know the applications well. They feel comfortable in that, but they have to rely on a hypervisor team and a server team and a storage team and a network team. And that slows them down. If they're not coordinating 100% all those activities, that can affect that user experience. And everyone wants the best user experience, of course. Everyone wants the fastest car. But honestly, when it comes down to it, what users really expect is that consistently good experience. And so anytime there's little hiccups here or there, that's what ultimately erodes that confidence in the user. So if you can just give that consistently, day in, day out, good experience, regardless of what's going on in the back end and other changes that are happening, that's so critical. And that's where I think hyperconverged still plays this really important role in collapsing those infrastructure pieces and allowing we have really big customers where the Citrix team basically just manages all the infrastructure for it. And they look at the Nutanix nodes, they're like, those are the Citrix nodes. That doesn't touch anything else in the data center. And it just is rock solid for Citrix day in, day out. And then the second piece is the hybrid cloud piece, right? It's looking at cloud is getting more and more expensive. The more you do cloud, the more expensive it gets. There's not a lot of scaling and then it starts to get cheaper. That doesn't seem to be playing out very well. Customers are looking at how do I pare back costs, and they're looking at exploding cloud bills, and they're saying, how do I get the best of both worlds? And so we just announced where Nutanix can actually run in Azure and actually a jointly developed bare metal service from Azure Nutanix. So you can run the same Nutanix cluster you could run in your data center or colo or whatever before. Now you can just run it in Azure, and it uses your Azure account, your networks, and your even Azure credits to pay for it. So that's really interesting. And what's really crazy about this is by being able to have Azure, it actually allows you to utilize your on-prem assets at a higher rate. So not only are you getting the flexibility of going back and forth from cloud to on-prem and back, but you're actually getting more utilization of your on-prem assets. So the fixed cost is getting even better in terms of the value you're getting. And when you have those DR events and those variable use cases, the end of the month processing, the end of the year retail surge, all those kind of events, you can just quickly ramp up a few more nodes of hardware in Azure, and boom, you've met that temporary need, and we can knock those nodes off in January whenever the need goes down. So I'm seeing those kind of two big pieces on the Nutanix side.
Oh, awesome! And we had a couple questions that came in, and Peter's question was actually specifically around some use cases for Citrix and as well as remote work from home solutions. So they were able to scale up very quickly using Citrix to basically do what's called remote PC, is assuming what you're using. And to answer your question on there is I've done a number of deployments with Citrix using remote PC to leverage currently invested technology that you have. You have those workstations at home or in your office. moving to a VDI solution, we don't have to not use those. We can do remote PC, leave them on the desk. Users can access them directly. That was probably the quickest on-ramp during the last 3 years to having work from home, where you can still keep those if they have NVIDIA GPU cards in there. You know what? We don't have to rebuy those. And then we can start looking at those in maybe like that next refresh cycle for you. So, you know, do we need to have those anymore? And if not, you know, maybe we go down to thin clients. But I guess from this part, that leads into a great question of, you know, what are some of the new use cases that we're seeing? Ray, I'm going to put this one to Ray first time. So like, what are some of the new use cases you're seeing in the VDI world with regards to your area?
So we're starting to see more and more customers being interested in, again, taking those higher end workloads, right? Like your computer aided drafting and engineering and that stuff. But I think what's really cool is when we take it up a step further, right? And now we're talking about collaborative 3D pipelines, right? And now, where before, if you and I were working on a project, you'd have to wait for me to get done with my piece. And then there's this big, huge file I got to send over, and we're worrying about versioning and all that other good stuff. Well, now we have solutions from NVIDIA where now we can start tying these workers together, and they're working live synchronously, right? And it doesn't matter if they're working behind the firewall or at home in a VDI instance, right? They can go on, use the same application they're used to, and they don't even have to be the same, right? And so it's pretty cool to watch this global workforce, right? Being able to collaborate on a project, no matter where they're at, no matter what time it is. And then what happens is ROI gets speed up, right? So that's pretty exciting to me, the whole simulation visualization portion of it.
All right. And I guess I'm going to go right over to Todd for some of the new use cases that Citrix is seeing from, like, you know, as we've kind of grown with VDI over the years.
And to kind of add on to what Ray was just explaining, we're seeing a lot of customers come back to us with this whole follow the sun mentality of project management. They want to be able to have resources around the clock working on the same environment, right? So you've got to have it centralized, which really kind of ties back to a good VDI solution. They need to be able to collaborate in real time. So that means that VDI solution needs to be able to incorporate all of the collaboration tools, whether it be Zoom or WebEx or, you know, Microsoft Teams, right? And those are all graphics intensive, because audio and video, if we're replacing the phone system with collaboration tools like Teams and WebEx and Zoom, it needs to be working 100% of the time, and it needs to be reliable, and you can't deal with the jitter and things like that. So really the collaboration activities and this mindset around people always working and always being on, or having the ability to always be on, has really been one of those newer use cases that's come out of the past couple of years. The other piece of it has been everything. Almost every single application now is a graphics hog, right? It has requirements for real-time video. It has requirements for 4K video. You know, they're using the graphics processing capabilities to do, you know, numeric calculations in the back end, right? That is something that has become normal. And as Kevin mentioned earlier about the power user or the knowledge worker, that paradigm shift, you know, you've got everyone in the company sitting in on audio video conferencing systems that are desktop based, right? They're not going into the room where they've got all the AV stuff set up. They're going in and doing it on their desktop or their laptop or the tablet devices. That requires a certain amount of horsepower on the back end to be able to deliver that. There's been a significant shift in that. So everyone has become a power user, and everyone is working in collaborative spaces almost daily.
Great. And Kevin, last up on this one there, where are you kind of seeing for some of the new use cases, like in your space, as you're having those conversations?
For me, it's a lot of these customers that went into COVID and they said, you know what, maybe traditional VDI is too complex, and we tried that a million years ago, and somebody didn't like it, so we scrapped it. And so a lot of these customers went direct to cloud native options like AWS Workspaces, AVD, and said, you know, I don't need these enterprise capabilities. I want to go really fast. And they were able to go really fast and nowhere. So a lot of these deployments, you know, either failed or they realized all the capabilities and functionality they were missing, and they're going back and saying, okay, how do I do that? Or maybe it worked, but for a small use case, for a small division. So, and they're saying, we like this, but this isn't the technology that's going to get us to where we want to do this for everybody or for every use case that we have. So they're saying, but I want to still take advantage of the cloud. I want to still have that flexibility. I'm concerned about supply chain. I'm concerned about, you know, having so many data centers. So how do I get the best of, I want to, you know, cloud DAS control plane and then a hybrid multi-cloud, you know, data plane to run all of my workloads, my virtual desktops, where I can run them anywhere, right? Any cloud, any data center, any hardware. So that's really kind of what I'm seeing is how do I make these kind of temporary COVID, you know, like knee-jerk type deployments that people threw out there, and how do I make that a real enterprise solution and expand that out now that this is not really a COVID anymore. This is just the new normal, and this is the new hybrid work styles that everybody's working with. So that's kind of the new use cases that I'm seeing is how to leverage all that together.
Not great. Like it's funny, like over the number of years, like I'm sure everyone here has heard this year is going to be the year of VDI, and VDI has been around for decades now in some form or another. And there's another question here from Mike asking about some of the cost optimizations. And first thing that I usually always say is VDI is not a cheaper solution. It is about efficiency and managing your desktop solution at a more efficient and optimized pathway. So reducing your patch management, deploying things faster, reaching your users at a quicker speed, no longer having to spin up new wait for new hardware to arrive, then provision it, then send it out to the end user. Instead, you can spin something up in a matter of seconds, give them some access, and away they go. So I guess, like, if I look back over the years, like, what are some of the biggest innovations that you guys have seen? And Todd, I'm going to ask you to kind of start this one again, just from, you know, like some of the cost optimization. Mike was asking, like, how can we control some of those costs? And I know Citrix has some really great tools in how to manage some of those costs from not even just an on-prem, but also extending into the cloud as well.
Yeah, so the biggest thing around cost management is really understanding what the users need to get their job done, right? If they only need the application, give them access to the application. You don't need to give them the full-blown virtual desktop environment to be able to do that. You're going to help manage your costs that way. Leveraging tools like Remote PC. Remote PC has been around for 10 plus years, and it was the savior of COVID times because a lot of customers had these devices that were sitting in their offices that were designed, and they had this little remote PC agent sitting on there waiting for the snow day to occur. Well, we just went through 2.5 years of a giant snow day. People couldn't go into the office, but yet their equipment that they needed was sitting out there, right? Let's give them a connection to that. So that was another cost-effective way of doing it. We've also added in a variety of other tools and capabilities into our solutions, including things like auto scale. So auto scale, if you're not familiar with that, that is the ability for the system to recognize that devices or actually virtual machines and virtual instances are not being utilized. They are gone into a quiet state and actually start powering those down, reducing your costs that way. Getting rid of and identifying virtual machines and virtual desktops that haven't been accessed in a period of time, taking those out of the fleet. So you take them out of the fleet, you're not being charged for them anymore. Being able to have consistent patch management and image management, and being able to say with our image portability service, saying, I've got all these images and all these virtual machines and virtual desktops on-prem, I need to now move them quickly up to Azure, AWS, or GCP, or Nutanix, I need to be able to move those quickly. Our image portability service will actually take those images and actually help you migrate those up into those cloud instances. So you do have a faster turnaround time to get and leverage that cloud resource. And the third biggest thing is really around the overall analytics capabilities, being able to have visibility into what the user experience is like, what the security is like, and what the operational controls are. So being able to kind of have more visibility as an administrator and an operations person to really kind of do some more fine tuning. And that's going to improve efficiency, but it's also going to reduce costs and also give that user a much better experience without compromising security.
Great. And then so Kevin, kind of expanding on that one for some of those innovations and where you're seeing how to optimize some of those costs. Like for me, Nutanix has one of the best licensing models for their per user there. So we don't have to license the whole Nutanix AHV stack from the hypervisor. You're doing a per user cost, which really kind of saves you money and gives you that granularity. Where else have you seen some of those innovations from Citrix or from NVIDIA Nutanix come in on your platform?
Yeah, the Nutanix VDI license is one of the best kept secrets. I mean, and this is something that I pushed for many years ago because, and coming from Citrix, I was used to just selling, hey, how many users are in Active Directory? Okay, 5,000. Okay, great. Here's 5,000 licenses. Problem solved. So I was like, we should just sell Nutanix the same way. It's just a software platform for delivering infrastructure for VDI. So, and that's what we did now. And actually, what's really cool now is it's portable. So if you want to have primary and DR, you can just migrate those licenses as the users fail over to your DR site. And then we've also extended that with the VDI Ultimate Edition into that Nutanix clusters in the cloud product. So you can actually fail over into that Azure or AWS bare metal Nutanix cluster. Again, you're just paying for the license for the user. There's nothing extra. So yeah, that's a really cool innovation on the licensing front. I mean, I wanted to take it all the way back to just x86 virtualization. I mean, I think for VD, that was sort of the first thing that I think people realized, wow, this is huge, and then we can run desktop operating systems side by side. But to me, the big Achilles heel of that was always the storage, right? I mean, when I first learned about Zen Server and vSphere, I realized 70% of what I needed to learn was all storage, Fiber Channel and iSCSI and all these different SAN technologies. And so when I saw Nutanix about 7-8 years ago, I realized, oh wow, this is what we were missing with that x86 virtualization, is the actual virtualization of the storage into the same fabric. And then I can just use my local storage. I don't even need a separate storage appliance, and I don't need all that extra complexity of storage networking. So that for me was kind of the original, two kind of pieces there. But then more recently, I think we mentioned the licensing, being able to go now into those bare metal services. So we don't, and what's cool is there's AWS and Azure, but there's also companies like Equinix Metal. There's a lot of these service providers that now just have basically an API for just you can, in an hour you can spin up a metal service in any of these data centers around the world. So, and then us being able to tap into that and then automatically install the hypervisor, the Nutanix software, boom, in an hour, you've got a cluster anywhere in the world. That's really game changing for a lot of customers that are trying to optimize their cost.
Oh, perfect. And Ray, I guess I've had a couple opportunities within healthcare specifically to really kind of leverage NVIDIA for what doctors are using from X-ray or on the Epic system, and really kind of backbone that with NVIDIA to give that higher level image quality. Like when they're looking at something, they need that crystal clear image. But where else are you guys seeing some of the direction of where NVIDIA is taking within the EUC space?
So yeah, the great question, kind of piggyback on what these gentlemen here said is, cost optimization. Let's talk about what the application is, right? And let's talk about what the user's actually doing. And I think how NVIDIA's responded over the years is it's not, here's your one GPU, go have fun with it. It's a T4, it'll do everything, right? Where now we can say, hey, let's talk about this user. What are they doing? What kind of densities can we get for that user type, right? Whether it be the creative technical user, we could throw an 840 at it, or an A16 for your knowledge and power user, right? We can do that as well. But now there's also GPUs that we can kind of sit in between for those in-betweener type user cases, right? So now we can get, we can dial it in a bit to affect the cost of the solution, right? There's no, why put 6 GPUs inside of a node when you don't have to, right? So let's optimize that. But some of the other cool innovations that are coming out is as the GPU has gotten more advanced, right? It's just not CUDA core, right? There's ray tracing cores inside there for the visualization piece, but now there's tensor cores, and now we're talking about AI, right? And we're going to see AI coming into VDI more than ever, right? And so that would be the coolest thing. When I don't have, when I'm reading off of something and you guys can't see my eyes looking down, but it's AI says, nope, we're going to make it look like you're turned right here. The camera's off to the side, but it doesn't look that way. It would, that's amazing to me. So.
Oh, that's great. And then I guess like touching upon some of the hypervisor area, like what role has the hypervisor kind of impacted in VDI for you, and as well as like within the new hybrid and multi-cloud world? Like I'm going to date myself and say like I've been using Citrix since the 4. something Metaframe days and VMware 3.1. Like so I've gone through all the trenches, had the problems, and coming out now, like I've done the Citrix Zen server at this point, and now primarily I lead with AHV as like the backbone hypervisor. But Kevin, like what are you seeing as like the role of the hypervisor for you?
So I went through, so actually when I was a new hire at Citrix, all of my entire new hire class was all people that were hired to go sell Zen server. The Citrix had just acquired Zen Source, and they had hired this big team of people, and they were going to, basically go compete with the VMware. And of course, Microsoft announced Hyper-V a few months later, and that sort of made it very challenging for Citrix to continue that as a standalone business. But it's still kind of a core part of their technology, and so I kind of had that kind of sense of like, okay, trying to sell a hypervisor doesn't really make sense. And then I joined Nutanix, and then like 2 months in, they're like, we're going to start having our own hypervisor. And I was like, oh my God, not this again. Like this sounds like a horrible idea. After, all the pain of Hyper-V and working hands-on with Zen server, I didn't really think we needed another one. But then what I looked at was, if you look at everyone else was looking at things like Amazon and Azure, and you realized technically there's a hypervisor there, but it doesn't matter, and it's not even something that's even exposed to the end user. And with Nutanix, our goal was always to make infrastructure invisible. And so when we came out and said we're going to have this hypervisor, it was also okay. It's technically going to be there, but it's going to be invisible. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, this is different. Like no one's tried this before. So, and we had the luxury of already having KVM as open source and was really rock solid already. We just needed to put the nice UI in front of it and make it built into the platform, and then optimize it for our use cases. And then everything's offloaded to the storage, because we are the storage system. We don't need to offload anything. It's just naturally taken on by the actual Nutanix storage system. So there's a lot of efficiencies in HP because there's no storage stack. Everything's efficient, thin cloning, all that kind of efficiencies that you get. And we can take this lightweight hypervisor, build it into the infrastructure stack. So all you're seeing is an HTML5 interface for here's your VMs. Here's how you manage your networks. There's never a time. Where a customer is going to log into their AHV host and do some sort of commands or something to manage the hypervisor. The same way you would update the Nutanix software, the system just with the same click is going to also update the hypervisor for you. So, and then being able to now port that into bare metal and all these different clouds. Now we have this data plane and control plane where you don't have to ever transform these VMs. We can run the same VM, and we can replicate it to different availability zones, different clouds. Folks like Equinix, your own data center. It could be running HPE, Dell, Lenovo. I think there's like 15 other brands that we support. So being able to run really anywhere, and you never have to touch the VM. You never have to convert anything. It just runs just as well as it did wherever it was running before. And so that unlocks all kinds of DR capabilities and everything else. But that's really, I think, for me, is where it's that baking that into the infrastructure stack was a key differentiator there for us.
Yeah. And Todd, I'm going to go right to you next, as you know, like coming from, like, you've been around long enough that you've seen all the Zen server and
Yeah.
gone through all the trenches, and now going into like the public cloud where, you know, like really we're just abstracting it. Like, what are you seeing from like a hypervisor standpoint?
Yeah, so it's great because, and actually as an attribute to the to the market that's available for hypervisors, you know, Citrix has just gone through a transition of going from being a publicly traded company to being privately held, and one of the business units that they've resurrected and really funded now has been the Zen Server business unit, right? So we're coming back to the market with some hypervisor capabilities that is really going into a much more mature market than we had when we kind of left it, right? So there's been a couple of major changes in the hypervisor space, right? So the first thing is you're not having to build hypervisors that are hardware specific anymore, right? So they found a way to abstract out the hardware requirements that are out there, right? And truly virtualize the hardware, right? You don't have to go and build all these drivers and all these different solution sets based on the processor type and based on the network card and based on the chipsets and things like that. That's all been simplified, right? So what happens is you can now focus on, let's get more speed, more efficiency, less power consumption, all of those things that are going to improve performance and reliability, and also make it so that it is dynamic and you can actually move it across multiple types of hardware. So that's been one of the critical things. And the second thing is hypervisors. You know, you talk to customers nowadays, and they don't really care what the hypervisor is, because more than likely they've got a slew of all of them, and they're looking at ways to say, hey, I want to build one image, or I want to build one environment that kind of cascades across all of the different hypervisors that I'm using. Very similar to what we're doing with the hybrid multi-cloud approach, right? We don't care what cloud provider you're using, it's just going to work. And I think that's one of those critical things, and that's kind of had the biggest impact on the hypervisor market, is this commonality that's out, that has kind of raised up and become normal.
Awesome. Ray, I'm going to throw a new question towards you here. And really, this is one that I think is going to be pertinent to a lot of people on here. Like, what are some of the key things organizations don't really seem to understand about VDI that keeps them from leveraging things that they probably should be?
So number one, we kind of go back to it a lot, right? Is this expectation that I can't do, you know, in VDI what I can do with my desktop, right? I have to have a desktop. It's the only way that it'll work, right? That's the only solution that I have. I think that's a big one. So one of the things that we've been doing here is, you know, let's get some keys for you guys, and you know, and here's a GPU for you to go to test on and go work on it and prove it, right? It's made us develop tools like the test drive, right? To go on and just take a look at a web browser. Let's go to a WebGL site, right? And let's see what that looks like on VDI versus, you know, your desktop, and you're going to find very, very similar performances that way. You know, I think it's kind of like your property, right? People like having the desktop. People like having their tool in front of them. But as technology moves on, right, and as we move forward, I think that folks are saying, look, it's not the thing, it's the experience, right? So as we kind of shift mindsets that way, I think that we'll see more and more customers adopting VDI, right? We have game developers now reaching out to us, right? I just had a call to game developer, and which, by the way, I was a hero to my kids because I dropped the name of who they were, and they're like, I play those games. I said, yeah, they developed them, you know, using my GPUs, and so I think more and more of that will be adopted, right? But I think it's the hardware that they're still stuck on sometimes.
Yeah, and it's funny, like you said, that like I think the biggest thing that I think organizations don't know for like NVIDIA side that I see is that you can do VDI in the cloud with NVIDIA still underneath it. As there, they go, oh, really? I didn't realize that that was an option. What does that even look like? And it's funny you mentioned some of the game companies. There's a couple of large game companies that helped design some of their VDI solutions for those game testers, where they're running like what would be a RTX 380 in a virtualized desktop for those testers to really kind of just go at it to stress it as much as possible. But Todd, over to you. Like, what are things that you see organizations really not understanding, or where they should be leveraging things that they should in the current area?
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge that we've had for a while with VDI is the sense that the user is losing out on some level of control, right? They're not equating that level of control change with improving efficiency and reducing their operating requirements, right? So the user doesn't have to go in there and worry about patches. The user doesn't have to go in there and worry about what happens if I have a virus event or a malware event. Well, in a VDI environment, you turn the machine off, you boot it back up from the clean image, and there you go. Problem solved. The challenge I think a lot of folks are having, and one of the new things that people are doing, it's becoming much more experiential for the user, right? For the end user, right? That experience is going to be consistent. It's going to be, I'll bring back a word from our prior CEO, delightful experience when it comes to what the users are looking for. They don't want to go backwards. They want to have something that's going to give them something positive in return. And maybe that's working more efficiently, or being able to work from anywhere on any device and just go directly back to your VDI or back to your application, get work done, and go back to your life, right? That whole work-life balance thing. And quite frankly, over the past 3 years, that work-life balance line has completely been demolished, because people are always on, they're always got something notifying them, and they don't have time to go back and forth between work and home because it's the same physical location. The other thing that's really become more critical from what I've seen is that scalability component of it, right? What happens when I need to burst out my workforce or add new capacity when I'm going through the game testing and I'm getting ready for the release date of a game, and I need to hire on a lot of testers, but they're only going to be with us for a couple of months or a couple of weeks. It's a gig economy kind of all in hyperscale, and be able to adjust that and be able to expand and contract, but also be able to do it securely, right? I think that's one of the biggest challenges that a lot of organizations have had over the past 3 years, is that they gave up security for speed to deploy and to get things out there. And the problem is that some of the solutions that were put in place left some pretty significant holes in the security models that were out there. And auditors are going to come back in force to come back and do security audits on a regular basis, and they're going to be asking questions about, how it's configured and how you're protecting the environment and what you're doing about home office workers and mobile workers and all the other things that have been out there. So it's going to be an interesting time.
Awesome. And Kevin, last up for you.
I think for me, it's just this cloud magic pixie dust that everyone seems to think that when you run your VM in a public cloud provider, that it's cheaper, more secure, better availability, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, like, it just blows my mind sometimes, and so it's kind of fun to do these TCO and security assessments, and we have a lot of tools that help facilitate that, both in a hand-holding way and an automated way. And so I think it takes customers sometimes that first deployment, or that first big deployment, to realize, oh, maybe this isn't going to be cheaper, and there actually is some the availability is not guaranteed in the cloud. So how do you architect around that? And even just the availability of a resource is not guaranteed. I mean, everyone thinks these things are like infinite, We saw during COVID that a lot of the GPU workloads, they weren't available. You had to either find a different, and what's crazy to me too is like, they don't publish the availability of it. And not, to my knowledge, none of the public cloud. So there's no way to know if you need 500, Q3, 4, whatever those crazy names of the cloud instances are. There's no way to know there's 500 sitting there available for you. Literally the only way to know if it's available is to try to power it on and see if you get an error message back. That's the only way to know. So how do you do business? Yeah, how do you do business planning around that? I mean, yeah, you can do reserved instances, but here's the getter on that reserved instances too. Then you start the reserved instances, they're usually 2-year-old hardware already. Yeah. And so by the year 3, you're running 5, 6-year-old hardware. You don't get the benefits of that evergreenness about the cloud, where if you're doing that the by the hour, by the month, whatever, you're usually getting the advantage of using the latest hardware. Those reserved instances means you're gonna be stuck on further and further. You're back in kind of the on-prem where it's like you need to do this refresh to newer hardware for a few years. So yeah, I mean, I just think that's the biggest thing for me in terms of what customers get surprised by or get wrong, is just that somehow when it's in the cloud, it has this like magic cloud pixie dust that solves all your problems for you.
So like, there's a couple times we brought up cloud now, and I think that, like, to me, that's like usually the biggest elephant in the room when I'm having conversations is like, like, am I deploying it in the cloud? Am I going hybrid? Why should I do this on-prem? And sometimes like I look at it saying, public cloud is great. You want to do it Azure native service. Let's take a look over the last 2 years, how many service outages that they've been, and are they regional or are they global? Like, as I can tell you right now, there's been a couple times where I've had customers come back and say, we need an on-prem solution in addition to our cloud solution on that. So like, Todd, I'm going to put this one to you. Like, with the public cloud adoption, what are some of the biggest opportunities that you see, and what are those like big challenge that you see with customers as they look to public cloud and VDI?
Yeah, so great question. And I think one of the biggest opportunities of public cloud and leveraging public cloud is in a DR scenario, right? Instead of having, if I need to burst out, if I need to add capacity, or I need to expand out and replace a data center that's gone down because of, some type of either natural disaster or human-caused disaster, how do I quickly do that? Right now, you basically buy a giant insurance policy with one of the DR providers, and you're paying that insurance policy every single quarter, and it tends to be very expensive. And also the time to recover is also expensive. So cloud has a good option there. The other area around, cloud opportunities is around those use cases where you need to spin up someone very quickly for a very finite amount of time. The temporary worker scenario, where the workload is not going to be huge, but it needs to be managed. So there's some cloud opportunities there as well. A couple of the areas for improvement, or areas of risk, almost every single cloud provider and almost every single cloud service, you really need to understand what the security model is associated with that. Security and reliability, right? So those are two things that Kevin just touched on as well, is that just because you sign a contract saying it's going to be available doesn't always mean it's going to be available, right? There's some challenges associated with that as well.
No, it's funny to hear that. Like, I've actually, knowing about the DR, like I've actually used the public cloud to help customer move offices where they've had some drafters that are using their 3D modeling, and we're able to extend their desktops into the cloud. They continued to work from home while the office shifted over during this like 2-week period, and then they repatriated everything back on prem and tore down the bursting of cloud. Like, Ray, on your side, like, what are you seeing as like from public cloud adoptions, from opportunities versus like challenges? Oh, Ray, you're on mute.
There you go. I didn't want to hear me coughing, so I muted myself. Sorry about that. But no, the bursting is huge, right? I'm bringing in, maybe just a training environment. I got to train people on this. Let's put it in cloud and have that happen, which is great, right? And obviously we have GPUs and all the major CSPs out there. But I think one of the challenges maybe is like, you know, I believe, you know, what hardware is back there, and are they going to get, again, I keep going back to experience again, right? So if I'm setting up some users here with, you know, 4 gig of frame buffer, is that what I set up in cloud? You know, what's that hardware GPU, or do I need to add a little bit more, what have you? So there might be a little bit of experience difference there, right? That, you know, that could be, you know, one of them. The cool thing that kind of came out from cloud and folks bursting and use workloads out there, it's really forced NVIDIA to want to start to form these partnerships with your AWSs of the world and all of them. But now it's also made us take a look and say, hey, what about our AI workloads too? And I know this isn't an AI conversation again, but there is going to be a melding of the two, right? So we're continually have to work with that. So I can see customers doing more and more AI wrapped around this VDI work load in the future, right? In cloud.
Absolutely. I think as we have those little AI pet projects migrate from underneath people's desktops into that VDI, where you can start modeling based off of like cloud resources or utilizing higher powered GPU cards in your VDI infrastructure, and then fully migrating it to the full like 8 GPU models servers that you're putting out there. There's going to be a lot of that coming up, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
So, and Kevin, for you, like, what are some of the opportunities and challenges with like public cloud that you kind of see in your space?
Yeah, I mean, I think they hit it on the head with DR and bursting. I think those are clearly the low hanging fruit for customers to look at as in terms of cloud. But when I'm looking at what customers are actually doing, a lot of times it's not exactly that. Like there was an interesting survey from last year. There was, you know, how VDI like a pro or DAS like a pro, and it was like, how many of you guys are already hybrid cloud? And I think it was like 50% of people were saying they're already quote hybrid cloud, and that shocked me until I started thinking about some of the customer conversations I've had. And I think what they mean by their hybrid cloud is they're already using multiple cloud technologies as a company, but they're not really integrated is usually what I'm seeing. Like what I'm seeing is a customer will have Citrix on-prem on 3-tier infrastructure, you know, kind of a legacy environment. They might have Horizon running on vSAN in a an acquisition they made 2 years ago that have never been integrated. Then they have a group of developers offshore that are running in Azure Virtual Desktop native in persistent desktop mode. And then they've got, a different, inside sales group using AWS workspaces. And it's like, okay, that's hybrid cloud. And it's like, that's like the worst of everything. I mean, like that's just complexity galore in terms of infrastructure, user experience. I mean, application management, monitoring, security. I mean, that's just like, I mean, I guess technically that's hybrid cloud, but to me that is worse than the worst case scenario. So for me, it's having a single front end and a single broker and a single user experience, and that's what to me was Citrix, and it's having a single infrastructure data plane, and that's Nutanix, and then all these things can be folded into into a single platform, and then. Because to me, what the big gotcha is always repatriation. So sure, I can replicate to cloud, and then I can do a disaster recovery there. But how do I then go back to on-prem, right, after the flood or the hurricane or whatever it is? How do I get back on-prem? Nobody seems to have a solution for that. I think even some of the tools that are out there, they're pretty much all one way, and they're pretty intensive in terms of services and all this other stuff. So, how do we get that back? If you don't have that shared platform, you don't have a good answer there. And if you're then stuck in that cloud, what's that look like in terms of cost and how do you get out of that situation? And so what's really interesting here too is if you're doing DR, it used to be, right, I need either a dedicated secondary data center with a bunch of hardware that's never being used. It's just on running, sucking up heat, doing nothing, right? Except the 1 or 2 weeks a year that you're doing the DR testing where you have an actual, event. And so customers are realizing that, of course, makes no sense. So I'm going to do in the cloud, but, we're going to hit this point where if enough customers are assuming the cloud's going to be their backstop and it's just always going to be available, you're going to have a large enough event where everyone's going to try to do those DR events to the cloud, and then there's just not going to be the resources available. So how do you do this in a way where you're not paying for reserved instances or a whole separate data center? And one of the interesting solutions that we're seeing, and again, this is part of having that multi-cloud, is you can actually replicate your on-prem into multiple clouds. So I can replicate all my desktops to Azure and AWS and Equinix if you want, or pick two of those if you want. And then I'm only paying for the storage. I'm not paying for the compute. Okay. And then if I actually have an event, I have multiple places that I can, within an hour or two, spin up huge clusters and then rehydrate all the data. And then boom, I've got my DR, and I'm not relying on one particular cloud or hosting provider.
So Kevin, I guess we're just about to wrap up here. I got one final question for each of you guys, in a quick 1 minute synopsis here. If you had your crystal ball right now over the next 2 to 3 years, where do you see VDI going in your aspect? Where do you predict it going on your side? Todd, I'm going to start with you from the Citrix side.
Yeah, so I think VDI is going to definitely continue to have its space out there. I think the approach towards VDI is going to be slightly different. There's going to be more of a desktop and application as a service delivery, all under the same guise, right? So what if I could say, have one instance where I can get an application, a desktop, or access to a service all through the same interface, and not have to worry about, okay, well, I'm a user, I need to pick what path I need to go down. I just need to access something that's going to allow me to manipulate data and get information out of it. It's going to help me identify what tool is necessary to be able to do that, what best set of tools I'm going to need to do that. And it could be a desktop or an application or a combination of that, and access to a service. So there's going to be a big push towards more of a collaborative approach towards solving this problem.
Perfect. And Ray, I'm going to ask you the same. Where do you see it going? You've already touched upon collaboration and AI on there for desktop workstations and VDI, but where else would you kind of see things going next couple of years for you?
No, for us, I think again, the more and more AI, right? The ability to make realistic avatars. So you guys could actually be seeing me, but I'll be sitting back just speaking into mic and the mouth's moving. So I can be in my PJs, but my avatar can be in NVIDIA garb, right? But bigger than that too is if this was a global conversation, we can have people in from Mexico and Japan, and then Riva would be able to take my conversation in English and then translate not just the transcription, but also the voice into the proper languages, which is huge, right? And then I think again, density, right? Density is going to be a thing for us. How dense can I get, and bigger GPUs? Yeah. If my minute's up, I say those would be the two bigger things.
And last one, Kevin, final word on the questions, and we'll move to a quick thank you for everyone. Where do you see VDI going in your head?
Well, Ray, I sleep in my Nutanix polo, so I guess technically I'm wearing my pajamas already. So I think we're already there. I'm a little bit, I guess I'm kind of negative here, but I really think we're going to see more of these black swan events in terms of the world's getting more and more fragile. I mean, we saw this with COVID, was a huge event that came out of nowhere. I think we're going to see more of these events. I look back to the Facebook or Meta had that WhatsApp incident, I think last year, where WhatsApp was basically gone the entire workday in the US. I mean, and a lot of companies outside the US actually run their whole business on WhatsApp. So I mean, I remember thinking the internet must have been down because WhatsApp wasn't working for an hour. And so I mean, imagine that happens at a big enough scale in one of the larger cloud providers they go a whole day without, being able to service anyone's use. So I think the services are getting so connected globally and just with fewer companies. I think some of these different events, whether it's weather related or cloud infrastructure related, and so I think the companies that are going to have this more agile mindset around having multiple solutions for their problems and being prepared for that are really going to be the ones that are going to navigate that really well.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're at time here. I want to thank everyone for jumping on today. Ray, Todd, Kevin, thank you so much for all of your time and all of your answers kind of going through. If anyone wants to reach out and have more conversations about VDI in the future, please do come through and talk to your CDW representative, and we'll be happy to jump on a call. I can probably grab any of the guys here and we can continue any point that you want to pick at that thread and start unraveling. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Great presentation, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.